The night was colder than death itself, the kind of night when even the wind seemed to whisper secrets. A heavy shovel cut into the soil, each thud echoing like a drum of doom. Elena Carter, 6 months pregnant, gasped for air through the gag tied cruelly across her lips. Her swollen belly trembled beneath the thin fabric of her dress, the life inside her kicking in panic, as if the unborn child sensed the horror unfolding. 2 shadows loomed above her. One was Daniel, the man she had once trusted with her heart, the father of her baby. His eyes were as dark as the earth he shoveled, filled not with love but with cold calculation. Beside him stood Sienna, his mistress, her smile wicked, her jeweled hand resting casually on his arm. Together, they looked down at Elena as if she were nothing more than a problem to be buried. "You should have stayed out of the way, Elena," Daniel muttered, his voice flat, almost bored. "Don't waste your breath on her," Sienna purred, her tone dripping with venom. "She won't last long." The pit yawned open, a shallow grave waiting to swallow a mother and her unborn child. Elena's muffled screams rose into the stormy night, but no one was supposed to hear them. Her wrists bled from the ropes that bound her, yet she fought desperately, her tears mixing with the dirt smeared across her face. The first shovelful of earth rained down on her body, heavy and suffocating. Elena's chest heaved, her lungs begging for air, but the soil kept falling, colder, heavier, crushing. She could hear Daniel's harsh breathing, Sienna's cruel laugh, and then nothing but the sound of earth sealing her fate. Her world narrowed into darkness, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. She thought of her baby, of the life she had dreamed of, and of the betrayal that cut deeper than any blade. For a fleeting second, she prayed, not for herself but for the child she carried. And then, just as her strength began to fade, a distant sound broke through the night. The crunch of boots on gravel. Someone was watching. But who could it be, and why had they come at this very moment? Before the night of betrayal, Elena Carter had lived a life that many would have called ordinary. But to her, it was everything she had ever wanted. At 28, she was a gifted architect with a promising career ahead. Her designs had begun attracting attention in New York, praised for blending elegance with warmth, modern steel with touches of humanity. But when she met Daniel, she set aside blueprints and contracts for love and family. She believed love was the strongest foundation of all. Elena had grown up in a modest but loving household. Her father was a history professor, her mother a painter. They were not wealthy, but they taught her values: kindness, resilience, and trust. Those lessons shaped her heart, and when Daniel entered her world, tall and ambitious with a smile that promised the future, Elena believed fate had sent her the man she was meant to build her life with. Within a year, they were married. Soon after, she learned she was carrying their first child. Pregnancy made her softer, more vulnerable. Every heartbeat inside her reminded her of the sacrifices she was willing to make. She left her prestigious design firm, telling herself she would return someday. But for now, the baby needed her full attention. She devoted herself to creating a home where laughter would echo, where a child could grow safe and cherished. From the outside, her life looked picture perfect. Their brownstone apartment was filled with blooming plants she nurtured, baby clothes folded neatly in the nursery, and framed photographs of a smiling couple who looked inseparable. Elena spent evenings preparing meals, waiting for Daniel to come home. When he arrived late, reeking of cologne not his own, she convinced herself it was just the stress of work. When he snapped at her for spending too much on prenatal vitamins, she blamed her own sensitivity. Elena's greatest weakness was her trust. She believed that love could cure flaws, that patience could mend cracks in a marriage. She ignored the pit in her stomach when Daniel's phone lit up with messages at midnight. She forgave him when he missed ultrasound appointments, telling herself he was working for their future. And she carried the burden of silence, never confessing her worries to friends or family. Still, there were moments of pure joy. She would sit by the window, hands on her swollen belly, humming lullabies her mother once sang. She imagined her child's first steps, the sound of Daniel's laughter as he lifted their baby high. Hope blinded her, and she clung to it desperately, refusing to see the storm gathering behind Daniel's eyes. Elena's vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was her belief in love, her devotion as a wife and a mother-to-be. She didn't know that these very qualities would be twisted against her, that the man she sacrificed everything for was plotting her destruction. The cracks in her dream life were widening, and soon the illusion would shatter beyond repair. New York City sparkled like a jewel at night, a city where fortunes were made under the glare of neon lights and broken in the shadows of skyscrapers. To outsiders, Daniel and Elena Carter were part of that glittering world, an ambitious couple climbing the ladder of success. Their address in Manhattan spoke of prestige. Their invitations to society galas placed them among the city's rising elite. But behind closed doors, the polished surface was already cracking. Daniel thrived in this environment. He loved the rush of expensive champagne, the flash of cameras, and the subtle games of power played at corporate events. Every gala, every fundraiser was an opportunity to expand his network, to brush shoulders with tycoons and politicians. He was intoxicated by status, and with Sienna Moore, a striking young PR specialist always on his arm at business dinners, he felt unstoppable. To him, Elena, with her gentle nature and growing belly, no longer fit into that picture. For Elena, those grand events felt suffocating. She wasn't dazzled by chandeliers or designer gowns. While Daniel reveled in attention, Elena often slipped away to quiet corners, sipping sparkling water and rubbing her belly, imagining bedtime stories instead of business deals. She wanted a family, not a front-page appearance. The glittering world that enchanted Daniel only deepened her sense of isolation. The backdrop of their life was filled with contradictions. Their apartment was decorated with modern luxury, Italian marble counters, glass walls, sleek furniture chosen more for display than comfort. Yet Elena tucked small touches of warmth into every corner. A rocking chair in the nursery, watercolor paintings from her mother, little knitted socks waiting for tiny feet. The home looked perfect in photographs, but inside, the air grew heavier each day, weighed down by Daniel's late nights and Elena's unanswered questions. The city outside pulsed with energy, limousines pulling up to red carpets, skyscrapers glowing with midnight board meetings, whispers of power plays carried through private lounges. Daniel belonged to that world, chasing wealth and recognition. Elena belonged to another, quieter world of love and innocence, a world she desperately tried to preserve for her unborn child. But the backdrop of their lives was not just glamorous, it was dangerous. Daniel's hunger for success had lured him into risky partnerships. His name appeared in whispers of corruption, deals sealed over midnight drinks, promises that could collapse everything if exposed. Sienna was not only his lover, but also his accomplice, pushing him further into darkness. She whispered that Elena was holding him back, that with her out of the way, nothing could stop them. Elena never saw the trap closing around her. She thought she was living in a world of dreams, but the city she trusted, the home she built, and the man she loved were conspiring against her. The glittering backdrop was only a mask, and soon it would shatter to reveal the nightmare beneath. Every betrayal has a face, and in Elena's story, it had two. Daniel Carter, her husband, was the man she had trusted with her dreams, her body, and her unborn child. To the world, he was a successful businessman with ambition in his eyes and charm in his smile. But behind closed doors, his charm was nothing more than a weapon, sharpened with greed. Daniel had always wanted more. More money, more recognition, more control. At first, Elena thought it was just drive, the natural hunger of a man who wanted to succeed. But over time, she realized it was an obsession. Success wasn't enough. He needed to dominate, to own. Every promotion was never fast enough, every deal never big enough. And as Elena's belly grew, so did Daniel's impatience. To him, her pregnancy wasn't a blessing. It was a burden that slowed him down, tied him to responsibilities he never wanted. And then there was Sienna Moore. She was the flame that fueled his darkest desires. Sienna was younger, strikingly beautiful, and dangerous in ways Elena could never be. Her career in PR gave her the perfect skills to manipulate and seduce. She knew how to flatter Daniel's ego, how to whisper promises of a life filled with power and passion. With her, Daniel didn't feel trapped. He felt invincible. But Sienna wasn't just a mistress. She was a strategist. From the moment she set her eyes on Daniel, she didn't just want him. She had everything he could give her. The penthouses, the parties, the empire. She despised Elena, not because of love, but because Elena stood between her and the life she craved. In private, she mocked Elena's kindness, calling it weakness. To Sienna, the pregnant wife was just an obstacle, one that had to be removed. Together, Daniel and Sienna formed a poisonous alliance. He supplied the ambition, she supplied the cunning. She pushed him to think bigger, to cut ties with his wife once and for all. But divorce wasn't enough for them. A divorce meant splitting assets, losing face, and enduring scandal. No, what they wanted was clean, permanent removal. Elena and her unborn child had to disappear. At night, while Elena slept alone, Daniel and Sienna whispered in hushed tones. They painted visions of a future where they ruled together, where Elena was nothing more than a fading memory. And each time Sienna leaned close, her perfume clinging to his suit, Daniel's resolve hardened. What Elena didn't know was that her husband and his mistress were no longer simply cheating. They were planning. Planning something final, something unthinkable. And soon, their secret alliance would turn her entire world into a grave. It began with whispers, small details Elena tried to dismiss. Daniel's late nights at the office, the sudden business trips that appeared out of nowhere, the faint trace of perfume that wasn't hers clinging to his shirts. She told herself not to overthink, not to become the paranoid wife. But some truths claw their way to the surface, no matter how hard you try to bury them. The first crack in the facade came at a charity gala. Elena, radiant in a flowing maternity dress, entered the ballroom on Daniel's arm. She was nervous but hopeful, believing this was her chance to reconnect, to remind him of the family they were building. The chandeliers sparkled above, the orchestra played softly, and for a moment, she felt almost proud. Then she saw her. Sienna Moore stood just a few feet away, draped in scarlet silk, her hand brushing Daniel's arm with a familiarity that made Elena's stomach twist. The crowd noticed too. Subtle glances, hushed whispers, curious smiles. Elena forced a smile, clutching Daniel's hand tighter, but he barely looked at her. His gaze lingered on Sienna. Later that night, as Daniel mingled with investors, Elena sat alone at their table. She heard the whispers around her. Poor thing. Doesn't she know? She looks so tired. I'd die of embarrassment. She's pregnant, and he's parading the mistress in public. The words cut deeper than knives. She tried to focus on her baby, rubbing her belly for comfort, but the humiliation was unbearable. She felt exposed, stripped of dignity in a room full of strangers who suddenly seemed like enemies. The second blow came days later at Daniel's office. Elena had prepared a surprise. Homemade lunch, his favorite dish packed neatly in a basket. She wanted to remind him of the woman who loved him, of the home waiting for him. But when she entered his office, her heart froze. Sienna was sitting in Elena's chair, legs crossed confidently, typing away as if she owned the space. Daniel looked up, startled for only a second before masking it with irritation. "What are you doing here, Elena?" he snapped, as if she were the intruder. Elena stood frozen, clutching the basket of food, the lilies she had brought trembling in her hands. The secretary avoided her eyes. Sienna smirked, leaning back in the chair that symbolized everything Elena thought she still had. It was a scene Elena would never forget. The day she realized her marriage was not just crumbling, but publicly ridiculed. She walked out of the building with her head down, but inside, something cracked. She still loved him. She still hoped for their child. But humiliation had planted a seed of fear in her heart, a whisper she could no longer silence. If Daniel could betray her so openly, what else was he capable of? After the humiliation at the office, Elena's world began to unravel. She returned home with the basket of untouched food still in her hands, her heart splintering with every step. The apartment that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a prison, silent, cold, filled with memories of a love that no longer existed. She placed the basket on the counter, sank into a chair, and finally let herself cry. The sobs came in waves, shaking her body until her swollen belly ached. She pressed her hands against her stomach, whispering apologies to the baby inside. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you have to feel this." The weight of betrayal crushed her, but the weight of responsibility pulled her in the opposite direction. She was carrying life, yet she felt like she was dying. Nights became her enemy. Alone in the bed she once shared with Daniel, Elena stared at the ceiling, counting the seconds until dawn. Every sound from the street outside made her jump. Was he coming home? Was he with her again? She clutched the sheets tightly, wishing she could turn back time, wishing she could erase the image of Sienna in her chair, Sienna in her husband's arms. Her reflection in the mirror frightened her, dark circles under her eyes, pale skin, and a sadness she barely recognized. Friends called, but she ignored their messages. She didn't want pity. She didn't want anyone to know how far she had fallen. Even the smallest tasks, making breakfast, folding laundry, tidying the nursery, felt impossible. The nursery especially hurt. The crib sat empty, waiting for a child who deserved joy, not a mother drowning in despair. But despair is a cruel companion. It whispers lies in the dark. One evening, as rain lashed against the windows, Elena found herself sitting on the bathroom floor, staring at a bottle of pills. For a moment she wondered if ending her pain was the only way. Her tears blurred the label, her breath shallow as she gripped the bottle. But then, her baby kicked. The small thump against her ribcage jolted her back to reality. She dropped the pills, clutching her belly with trembling hands. "No," she whispered through sobs. "I can't. I have to be strong for you." It was the faintest glimmer of hope, but it was enough to stop her from falling completely. Still, the breakdown had left scars. Elena knew she could no longer trust Daniel, but she didn't yet know the depth of his cruelty. She didn't know that her darkest moment was only the beginning. Because while she struggled to hold herself together, Daniel and Sienna were already planning how to break her once and for all. While Elena was drowning in despair, Daniel and Sienna were intoxicated by their secret victories. To them, humiliation was not enough. Divorce was not enough. They wanted freedom, wealth, and power without complication. And for that, Elena, along with her unborn child, had to vanish. It started with whispers behind closed doors, in dimly lit hotel rooms where champagne glasses clinked and stolen kisses turned into dangerous promises. Sienna, her lips painted blood red, leaned against Daniel's chest, her voice low and persuasive. "She's in the way, Daniel. You know it as well as I do. As long as Elena's alive, she holds the key to your reputation, your money, your empire. But if she's gone—" Her words trailed off, but her eyes gleamed with cruel certainty. Daniel hesitated at first. He had betrayed his wife, humiliated her, but murder was another matter. Yet the seed was planted, and Sienna watered it with every whisper. "You deserve to live without chains," she told him. "You deserve me, us, without her shadow hanging over you." Soon hesitation turned into calculation. Daniel began researching Elena's life insurance policy, quietly meeting with shady acquaintances under the guise of business. He scrolled through messages late at night, deleting evidence, piecing together a plan. Sienna encouraged him, her excitement barely concealed. Together, they became architects of destruction. Their plan grew darker each day. A staged accident? Too risky. A sudden illness? Too many questions. Then came the idea that made Daniel's heart pound, burying her alive. No witnesses, no messy evidence, just silence. It was Sienna's idea, whispered with a smile as if she were suggesting a new vacation. "Think about it," she said, her fingers tracing circles on his arm. "She disappears. People will assume she left you, no one will look too closely, and will finally be free." Daniel stared at her, his mind racing. It was madness. It was final. But it was also perfect. As the storm raged outside one evening, Daniel looked at Elena across the dinner table. She sat quietly, her hand resting protectively on her belly, her eyes still carrying the faint hope of a wife who wanted to believe in her husband. He forced a smile, nodding at her, while inside he had already decided her fate. The deadly plan was set in motion. He would lure her to a construction site under the pretense of a new project. Sienna would be waiting. The shallow grave had already been prepared. And while Elena hummed softly to her unborn child, Daniel rehearsed the lie he would tell her the night he delivered her into the earth. The betrayal was complete, but what he didn't know was that someone else had already begun watching. The night Daniel chose for his plan was carefully crafted. Rain drizzled across the city, blurring the streetlights into streaks of gold and gray. Elena, weary from days of silence between them, was startled when Daniel suddenly appeared at the apartment door earlier than usual. He carried a bouquet of lilies, her favorite, the same flowers she had once brought to his office when she caught him with Sienna. "Elena," he said softly, his tone rehearsed. "I know I've been distant. I want to make it right. Come with me. There's something I want to show you." Her heart lifted at the words she had longed to hear. For a moment, the pain of betrayal dimmed, replaced by the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, he still cared. She clutched her belly protectively, hesitant but yearning. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To see the future," Daniel replied smoothly. "The project I've been working on, it could change everything for us. I want you to be the first to see it." The lie slid effortlessly off his tongue. Elena, desperate for reconciliation, nodded. She changed into a warm coat, slipping her feet into flats that pinched against her swollen ankles. Daniel took her hand, guiding her into the car with a tenderness that felt almost real. Almost. As they drove through the rain-slicked streets, Elena gazed out the window, speaking softly to her unborn child. "Maybe things will get better, little one. Maybe your father is finally coming back to us." Daniel's grip tightened on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched. He didn't answer. The city lights faded as they drove farther into the outskirts, where half-built structures loomed like skeletons against the stormy sky. Elena shivered, pulling her coat tighter. "Daniel, where are we?" "Just a little further," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were cold, fixed on the road ahead. Finally, the car stopped at a desolate construction site. Metal beams jutted into the sky, and puddles reflected the pale moonlight. The air smelled of wet cement and earth. Daniel stepped out, circling to open her door with forced chivalry. "Trust me," he murmured, extending his hand. Elena hesitated. Something in his tone, something in the emptiness around them, made her chest tighten. Still, she followed, her footsteps hesitant on the muddy ground. She believed in love. She believed in him. As they walked deeper into the site, Elena noticed the ground disturbed, as if freshly dug. She paused, her instincts screaming. "Daniel, what is this place?" He turned to her, his smile thin and lifeless. Behind them, a figure emerged from the shadows. Sienna, her red lips curling into a smirk, and in that instant, Elena knew. She was not there to see a future. She had been lured to her grave. The rain had turned the earth into mud, sucking at Elena's shoes as she followed Daniel into the half-built site. The skeletal frames of concrete walls rose around them like the ribs of a monster. Every instinct in her body told her something was wrong, but she clung to the hope that her husband had brought her here for love, not destruction. Then she saw it. A gaping hole in the ground, soil piled high beside it, the unmistakable shape of a shallow grave. Her heart stuttered, her grip tightened on her belly. "Daniel," her voice trembled. "What is this?" He didn't answer. Instead, Sienna stepped forward from the shadows, her red heels sinking slightly in the mud. She smiled, cruel and satisfied. "It's your goodbye party, sweetheart." Elena's eyes darted between them, disbelief clouding her vision. "No, Daniel, tell me this isn't real. Tell me she's lying." But Daniel's face was stone, his eyes void of warmth. "You were never supposed to be here, Elena. You were supposed to stay quiet, small, in the background. But you became a problem." Her knees weakened. She had given him her youth, her dreams, her trust, and now he was erasing her. Tears blurred her sight as the rain mingled with them, cold streams against her cheeks. "I'm carrying your child," she whispered desperately. Sienna laughed, a sound sharp enough to cut through the storm. "Do you really think that matters? Daniel doesn't want a child, he wants freedom, and I'm the one who can give it to him." Before Elena could respond, Daniel moved. His hand shot out, shoving her hard. She stumbled, crashing to the muddy ground, the impact jarring through her pregnant body. Pain exploded in her side as she clutched her belly, gasping for breath. "Please," she cried, her voice breaking. "Don't do this. You don't have to." But mercy had no place here. Daniel grabbed a shovel, his knuckles white against the wooden handle. He began scooping soil back into the grave, each thud like a death knell. The sound of earth striking earth was deafening, drowning out Elena's sobs. Sienna crouched beside her, her perfume sickly sweet even in the rain. "Don't worry, darling," she whispered mockingly. "We'll take good care of everything once you're gone." Elena thrashed against the mud, her hands scraping against rocks, her wrists raw from the ropes they had tied. She screamed, but the storm swallowed her cries. Above her, Daniel and Sienna stood together, united in cruelty, watching as the grave filled. Elena's world narrowed into terror and betrayal. She prayed desperately, not for herself, but for the tiny heartbeat within her. And then, just as the soil began to cover her legs, she caught something, a flicker in the distance, movement beyond the construction beams, a shadow watching. Someone was there. But would they reach her before the earth swallowed her whole? The first shovelful of dirt struck her legs like a hammer, cold and heavy. Elena gasped against the gag, her screams muffled as Daniel tossed another load into the shallow pit. The soil piled higher, seeping into her clothes, clinging to her skin. Every grain was a weight pressing her down, stealing her air. Her wrists burned from the ropes that cut deep into her flesh as she struggled. She kicked, twisted, clawed at the earth with her bound hands, but it was useless. The mud swallowed her movements, dragging her deeper into silence. Daniel's face hovered above her, rain dripping from his hair. He didn't look like the man she once loved. He looked like a stranger, a monster carved out of greed and emptiness. Beside him, Sienna lit a cigarette under the shelter of a steel beam, her eyes glittering with triumph. She blew smoke into the night as if she were watching a performance, not a murder. Elena's chest heaved. She tried to cry out his name, to beg, to remind him of the child, but the gag strangled her words. Panic clawed at her lungs as the soil climbed higher. Her stomach, her chest, her throat. The baby kicked inside her, a desperate thump against her ribs. It was life fighting for life, a reminder that she wasn't alone in the grave. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered a prayer in her heart. Please, let me live for my child. Don't let this be the end. Her mind spiraled with memories. The first time Daniel kissed her, the vows they exchanged, the nursery she had painted in soft shades of blue. She thought of her father's laugh, her mother's lullabies, the dreams she still carried. All of it slipping away, buried beneath the weight of betrayal. The earth reached her neck. She tilted her head back, straining for air, her lungs burning. Her vision dimmed at the edges, the night closing in. Above, Daniel dropped the shovel and took Sienna's hand, their silhouettes framed by lightning. They walked away without looking back. Darkness pressed in, the world grew smaller, tighter. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, each beat slower, weaker. The unborn child kicked again, one final desperate plea. Elena summoned every ounce of strength, her nails tearing against the ropes, her body thrashing beneath the suffocating soil. But the earth was merciless. Her breaths came shallow, ragged, almost gone. She closed her eyes, surrender tugging at her like a tide. This was it. This was how her story would end, in silence, in darkness, erased by the two people she trusted least. But then, through the haze of near death, a sound pierced her fading consciousness. The crunch of boots on gravel, heavy, purposeful footsteps. Someone was running toward her, and in that instant, a spark of hope ignited. She was not alone in the grave. The world had almost gone silent for Elena. The pounding of her heart was fading, her lungs collapsing under the weight of soil. Her vision was a blur of blackness, and for a moment she thought she had slipped beyond the point of return. Then the sound came, boots slamming against gravel, the clatter of metal tossed aside, a man's voice shouting through the storm. Hands strong and frantic, clawed at the earth, covering her chest. Each scoop of soil pulled her back from the brink, dragged her closer to the surface. Elena's eyes fluttered open. A flashlight beam cut through the rain, blinding her for a second. The silhouette of a broad-shouldered man hovered above her, his movements desperate. "Stay with me," he barked, his voice urgent but steady. "You're not dying tonight. Not you, not the baby." It was Michael Evans, the man William Blackwell had secretly assigned to watch over her. She didn't know his name yet, didn't understand why he was there, but in that moment, he was the line between life and death. Michael ripped the gag from her mouth, and Elena gasped, sucking in air like it was fire. She coughed violently, her throat raw, her tears mixing with mud. "Please," she whispered hoarsely, clutching her stomach. "My baby." "You're safe now," Michael reassured, cutting the ropes from her wrists with a swift blade. "I saw everything. I've got you." He lifted her from the grave, cradling her against his chest like she was fragile glass. Her body shook uncontrollably, her breaths ragged. Every movement sent pain shooting through her, but she clung to him, clung to the faint heartbeat still alive inside her. In the distance, Daniel's car engine roared to life. He and Sienna were already gone, believing they had buried her forever. They had no idea she was breathing again, that their perfect crime had a witness. Michael carried her to a waiting SUV parked in the shadows. Rain pounded on the roof as he settled her inside, wrapping her in a blanket. She stared at him with wide, terrified eyes. Why are you helping me? He met her gaze, his jaw set with grim determination. Because someone powerful wants you alive, and because monsters like them don't get to win. Elena's body trembled, but inside her something shifted. She was no longer just a victim, gasping for survival. She was a mother, alive, with a chance to fight back. Her lips quivered as she whispered, "They think I'm dead." Michael nodded, and that's exactly what will let them believe. For the first time that night, Elena's tears weren't just of pain. They carried a flicker of something else. Hope. The grave had not claimed her, and now her enemies would never see her coming. The SUV cut through the storm, its headlights carving a path toward the edge of the city. Elena sat trembling under the blanket, her body sore, her wrists raw, her belly aching with every breath. She clutched her stomach protectively, whispering silent prayers that her baby was still safe. Across from her, Michael Evans kept his eyes on the road, his expression grim, his hands steady on the wheel. "Where are you taking me?" Elena finally asked, her voice hoarse. "To someone who's been waiting," Michael replied. "Someone who's been protecting you long before tonight." Confusion flickered in Elena's tired eyes. She wanted to demand answers, but exhaustion pulled at her, dragging her into restless sleep. When she awoke, the storm had quieted, and the SUV was parked in front of a sprawling estate outside Manhattan. Towering iron gates swung open, revealing manicured lawns and a mansion glowing warmly in the night. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and old books. Michael guided her into a study lined with shelves of leather-bound volumes. Behind a massive oak desk sat a man she had only seen in the news. William Blackwell, one of the wealthiest and most enigmatic figures in America. His silver hair gleamed under the lamplight, his dark eyes sharp yet kind. "Elena," he greeted softly, rising to his feet. "I've waited a long time for this moment." Her brows knitted. You know me?" William nodded slowly. "I knew your father very well. He saved me once, saved my company when I was a younger man. In return, I made him a promise to watch over you should the day ever come when you were in danger." Elena's breath caught. Memories of her father flooded back, his laughter, his words of wisdom, his sudden death years ago. You've been watching me all this time?" "Yes," William said firmly. "Your father entrusted me with something, your inheritance. A fortune he wanted hidden until you were ready. He wanted you to live a normal life, free from greed and predators like Daniel." Shock rippled through her. "Inheritance? I don't understand." William stepped closer, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You're not just Elena Carter, the architect. You are the rightful heir to one of the largest estates in New York. And Daniel, he suspected. That's why he married you. That's why he tried to erase you." Tears welled in Elena's eyes, a storm of grief and fury mixing inside her. "He wanted me gone. Because of this?" William's gaze hardened. "Yes, but he failed. And now, Elena, it's time you learned the truth and took back what is yours." Elena stood trembling, her heart racing. The pain of betrayal still seared her, but now it was joined by something stronger: purpose. She was no longer just a victim. She was an heir. And soon, Daniel and Sienna would learn that the woman they tried to bury had returned, stronger than ever. For days, Elena rested in the safety of William Blackwell's estate. The nightmares never left her. Visions of Daniel's cold eyes, the suffocating weight of soil, Sienna's cruel laughter. She would wake up gasping, clutching her stomach, reminding herself she was still alive. Her baby was still alive. And that truth became her anchor. William kept his word. He didn't just offer her shelter, he offered her power. "You can't return to your old life," he told her one morning, his voice calm but resolute. "To the world you're gone. Daniel believes you're buried, forgotten. That is your greatest weapon. You'll rise when the time is right, but first, you must be ready." Elena, still trembling with grief, frowned. "Ready for what? I'm no fighter. I'm just—" Her hand touched her belly, a mother trying to survive. William's dark eyes softened. "And that is exactly why you will win. You're fighting not only for yourself, but for your child. That strength, Elena, is far greater than anything Daniel or Sienna will ever have." Michael stepped in then, carrying files, photographs, documents. "We've been tracking them," he said, laying the evidence across the table. Pictures of Daniel and Sienna in luxury hotels, transactions siphoned from joint accounts, secret meetings with corrupt investors. Every photo was a dagger to Elena's heart, but also fuel for the fire inside her. "Look at them," Michael said firmly. "They believe you're gone. They're careless now. That arrogance is our opportunity." The days turned into weeks, and William began shaping Elena into someone new. She learned to control her voice, her posture, her presence. No longer the timid wife, but a woman who could command a room. Michael trained her in reading contracts, spotting lies, and even simple self-defense. "Knowledge is protection," he reminded her. At night, William shared stories of her father, his brilliance, his mistakes, his dream that Elena would one day lead with both heart and strength. She cried often, mourning what she lost, but with every tear, her resolve deepened. She stood before a mirror one evening, draped in a sleek black dress William's team had tailored for her. The woman staring back was no longer fragile. Her eyes, though scarred by pain, burned with determination. She touched her belly and whispered, "We will not be victims, we will rise." William nodded in approval. "When the time comes, you'll walk into the light again, Elena. And when you do, Daniel and Sienna will wish they had never touched you." For the first time since the grave, Elena felt a surge of power. She was no longer the woman who begged for love. She was preparing for war, and soon the world would witness the rebirth of the woman they tried to bury. While Elena rebuilt herself in silence, Daniel and Sienna celebrated loudly. To the world, Elena Carter had vanished, another society wife who couldn't handle the weight of her husband's ambition. Daniel played the grieving widower with perfect precision, telling colleagues that Elena had left him for personal reasons. In private, he and Sienna toasted their newfound freedom with expensive champagne. Their nights were filled with glittering parties, Sienna parading in jewels Elena had once worn, her laughter echoing through the penthouse halls. She sprawled across Elena's bed, draped in silk sheets, whispering promises of the empire they would build together. Daniel, drunk on power and lust, believed her every word. Financially, everything seemed to fall into place. With Elena gone, Daniel gained control of her accounts, selling off assets that were never his to touch. Sienna pushed him further, encouraging reckless investments and bolder displays of wealth. "Let them see us," she purred one evening, adjusting her diamond necklace in the mirror. "Let them see who really runs this city." But beneath the glitter, cracks were already forming. Daniel's arrogance blinded him, but whispers circled through the business world. Partners noticed his impulsive decisions. Rivals sensed weakness. And though Sienna clung to his arm in public, she whispered in private about how she could have done better. How Daniel was still too cautious, too haunted by the ghost of the woman they thought gone. Still, they reveled in the illusion of victory. They attended galas draped in luxury, their photos splashed across magazines. Sienna smiled at the cameras, her hand proudly on Daniel's chest, while reporters praised her as the new queen of his empire. The perfect couple, headlines called them. Neither flinched at the irony. In the penthouse nursery, the one Elena had painted with soft blues, Sienna laughed as she ordered decorators to strip it bare. "No child, no crib, no mess," she sneered. "This is our space now." Daniel watched silently, but said nothing. The image of Elena clutching her belly sometimes flickered in his mind late at night, but he drowned it with whiskey and Sienna's perfume. Their arrogance grew, their cruelty unchecked. To them, Elena was gone forever. They believed they had buried not just a woman, but the last obstacle standing in their way. But across the city, in the quiet estate of William Blackwell, Elena was alive. She was waiting, learning, preparing. And while Daniel and Sienna celebrated their triumph, their downfall was already being written. For now, they raised their glasses high, blind to the storm that would soon crash through their perfect facade. They believed they had won everything, never realizing they had already lost it all. The night of her return was carefully chosen. William Blackwell didn't believe in coincidence. He believed in timing. And tonight, Daniel was hosting a major shareholders' gala, a night he had orchestrated to cement his reputation as the sole power behind his company. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, gold accents, and glasses of champagne raised in his honor. Sienna clung to his arm like a prize he had earned, dazzling in a crimson gown that screamed triumph. Every eye in the room watched them, the new golden couple. Investors whispered about Daniel's rise, unaware of the rot beneath the surface. Sienna soaked in the attention, her smile smug, her gaze daring anyone to question her place at his side. For them, the night was victory embodied. Then the doors opened. A hush rippled through the crowd as heads turned. A woman stepped inside, tall, radiant, and commanding. She wore a sleek black gown that hugged her figure, her hair cascading in soft waves, her eyes sharp as glass. She walked with the poise of someone who owned the room, each step echoing against marble floors like the toll of a bell. It was Elena. Alive. For a heartbeat, silence consumed the gala. Champagne glasses froze mid-air, whispers caught in throats. Daniel's face drained of color, his jaw tightening. Sienna's smirk faltered, her grip on his arm tightening until her knuckles whitened. Elena met their stunned gazes but didn't flinch. She was no longer the timid wife who cried in the shadows. She was reborn, cloaked in strength and dignity. "Good evening," she said smoothly, her voice carrying through the room. "I hope I'm not interrupting." The crowd erupted, gasps, murmurs, disbelief. Some investors rushed forward to greet her, recognizing her as Daniel's long-absent wife. Cameras flashed, desperate to capture the impossible sight. Elena smiled faintly, accepting their astonishment with grace. Daniel stumbled forward, his mask of confidence cracking. "Elena," he hissed under his breath, his voice low, trembling with panic. "You're supposed to be gone?" she finished for him, her eyes never leaving his. "Funny how life doesn't follow your plans." Sienna tried to laugh, tried to wave it off as some dramatic stunt, but her voice trembled, betraying the fear in her eyes. Elena simply turned away from her, focusing instead on the room full of witnesses, now questioning everything they thought they knew about Daniel Carter. That night wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about resurrection. About showing the world she had not been erased but transformed. Elena Carter was alive, stronger, and ready to claim what was hers. As the flashbulbs popped and the whispers turned into shouts, Daniel realized the illusion of victory was slipping from his hands. The woman he tried to bury had returned, and this time, she wasn't going to be silent. The shock of Elena's reappearance still hung in the air when she stepped onto the stage where Daniel had been basking in applause minutes earlier. The spotlight shifted, illuminating her figure against the glittering backdrop. Every camera in the ballroom swung to her, every eye fixed on the woman who was supposed to be gone. Daniel stumbled forward, sweat prickling his forehead. "Elena, this isn't the time." She cut him off with a single glance, her voice calm but razor-sharp. "You've had plenty of time, Daniel. Years, in fact. Tonight, the truth belongs to me." The crowd murmured. Investors leaned closer. Reporters raised their phones. Elena drew a breath and turned to Michael, who was standing discreetly at the side of the room. He opened a leather briefcase and handed her a stack of files. Her hands were steady as she lifted the first document. For months, Daniel Carter has funneled money out of joint accounts into private ventures. Here are the transfers. Millions siphoned away, not for business, but for indulgence. Gasps rippled through the audience. She laid down another file. Here are the photographs. Daniel Carter and his associate Sienna Moore in luxury hotels, on trips billed to the company. The images flashed on a large screen behind her. Intimate pictures of Daniel and Sienna, undeniable, damning. Sienna paled, her crimson lipstick suddenly too bright, too garish under the lights. Elena's voice grew stronger with each word. "You all trusted him. You invested in him. And this is what he's done. Lies, betrayal, corruption." Daniel lunged toward her, trying to grab the files, but Michael intercepted him, stepping between them like a wall. The crowd erupted in whispers that grew into angry shouts. Investors who once clinked glasses with Daniel now pointed fingers, demanding answers. Sienna tried to recover, stepping forward with a brittle smile. "She's lying. This is all fabricated." But Elena wasn't finished. She held up one last document, her eyes burning with resolve. "And here is the truth Daniel wanted buried with me. My inheritance, my rightful claim. Assets Daniel married into but never owned. He thought he could erase me and take it all. But I'm alive, and everything he tried to steal now returns to its rightful place." The room erupted into chaos. Some applauded, others gasped. Cameras flashed like lightning. Daniel's face twisted with rage, veins bulging in his neck as he shouted over the noise. "You don't know what you're doing, Elena. You'll regret this. But his words carried no weight anymore. The power had shifted. Elena stood tall under the spotlight, not as a broken wife, but as a woman reborn, armed with truth. And as Daniel's empire trembled on the edge of collapse, Elena delivered her final blow of the night. The grave you dug for me, Daniel, has become the grave of your own empire. The gala ended in chaos. What was supposed to be Daniel's night of triumph had turned into a nightmare broadcast to every influential figure in the city. By the next morning, headlines screamed betrayal, corruption, and scandal. Pregnant wife returns from the dead to expose husband splashed across the front pages. Social media erupted, branding Daniel and Sienna as predators who had preyed on a vulnerable woman. Investors panicked. Stocks tied to Daniel's company plummeted overnight. Phone calls went unanswered, deals collapsed, and once loyal partners severed ties to protect themselves. Board members who had smiled beside him only days before now demanded his resignation. "You've destroyed the company," one executive hissed during an emergency meeting. "We won't go down with you." Sienna, once adored in designer gowns, found doors slamming in her face. Invitations to galas vanished. Influential friends unfollowed her, brands canceled contracts, and whispers followed her everywhere. Homewrecker, snake, murderous. Her pride curdled into rage. She stormed through the penthouse, smashing glasses, her screams echoing. "This was supposed to be our empire, Daniel. You promised." Daniel, stripped of his confidence, paced like a caged animal. He drowned himself in whiskey, his shirt unbuttoned, his eyes bloodshot. The man who once strutted through boardrooms now barked at shadows, paranoid that every knock on the door was the police, every phone call another betrayal. He clung to Sienna, but even she began to resent him, her loyalty cracking under the weight of failure. The backlash was merciless. Reporters camped outside their building, cameras flashing whenever they dared step out. Protesters shouted Elena's name, praising her courage, demanding justice. Daniel tried to issue a statement, claiming Elena fabricated the evidence, but no one believed him. The images, the documents, the testimony, it was undeniable. His credibility was gone. Meanwhile, Elena's strength grew. Media outlets painted her as the woman who had risen from betrayal and near death, a mother fighting not only for herself but for her unborn child. Sympathy swelled for her, while hatred for Daniel and Sienna intensified. She didn't speak often, but when she did, her words cut deep. "They tried to bury me, but the truth cannot be buried." At night, Daniel raged, smashing bottles, blaming Sienna for pushing him too far. Sienna, her mask slipping, snapped back. "You're weak. I carried you this far, and you still failed." Their partnership, once united in greed, fractured under the pressure. The world they had built on lies crumbled piece by piece. But the worst was yet to come. Because Elena wasn't finished. She had exposed them, yes, but soon she would strip away the last shred of their dignity. And as Daniel stared at the headlines that branded him a monster, he realized the truth. The grave he dug for Elena had become the pit he and Sienna were now sinking into, with no one left to save them. The boardroom was silent when Elena entered. Cameras lined the walls, reporters packed the corners, and executives sat stiffly around the polished mahogany table. The meeting had been called to decide the fate of Daniel Carter, but everyone knew it was more than that. It was the day truth would face deceit. Elena walked with poise, dressed in a tailored navy suit that commanded respect. The baby bump beneath her blouse was visible, a living symbol of resilience. At her side was William Blackwell, his presence like a fortress, and Michael Evans, standing as silent proof of everything that had happened. Daniel sat at the far end of the table, his tie loosened, his face haggard. Sienna hovered behind him, her once perfect composure cracked. She tried to flash a smile for the cameras, but her eyes betrayed fear. Elena's gaze locked on Daniel. "You tried to erase me," she began, her voice calm yet strong. "But here I stand, alive, stronger, and ready to finish what you started." Daniel scoffed, forcing a laugh. "You think this little performance changes anything? You're nothing without me. You were always nothing." Elena placed a file on the table, sliding it across to the board members. Inside were contracts, bank statements, and Michael's recorded testimony of the night Daniel and Sienna buried her. Gasps filled the room as executives leaned forward, their faces hardening. "This," Elena said, her voice ringing clear, "is the truth. Evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and attempted murder. Daniel Carter is not a leader. He is a criminal. And the world deserves to know. Sienna panicked, whispering fiercely into Daniel's ear, "Do something." But he sat frozen, his confidence shattered. The board chair cleared his throat. Effective immediately, Daniel Carter is removed from all positions of authority. These files will be forwarded to law enforcement. Chaos erupted. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, voices collided in the air. Daniel shot to his feet, slamming his fists against the table. "You can't do this. I built this empire." Elena met his fury with quiet strength. "You didn't build it. You stole it. And now you'll lose it all." Sienna, realizing the tide had turned, tried to slip away, but Michael blocked her path. The cameras caught every angle. Her trembling hands, her pale face. "Don't touch me," she hissed, but her voice cracked, weak. Elena didn't raise her voice, but her words struck like thunder. "You buried me alive, Daniel. You left me to die with your child inside me. But the grave you dug became the stage for your downfall. That is justice." The room fell into stunned silence. Reporters scribbled furiously, flashes exploded, and Daniel slumped into his chair, defeated. Sienna sank beside him, her facade shattered completely. Elena stood tall, her eyes steady, her heart calm. She had faced her betrayers and won. The battle was over, but the story of her rebirth was only beginning. The fall of Daniel and Sienna was swift and merciless. Within hours of the confrontation, news outlets broadcasted Elena's evidence across the nation. Every document, every photo, every testimony spread like wildfire. The glamorous facade of Daniel Carter and Sienna Moore collapsed under the weight of undeniable truth. Police stormed Daniel's penthouse before dawn. Reporters swarmed outside as flashing lights illuminated the night. Daniel, once hailed as a rising mogul, was dragged out in handcuffs, shouting curses at the cameras. His face, once the image of charm, was now twisted in rage and desperation. "This is a setup," he screamed, but no one believed him anymore. Sienna's arrest came hours later. She tried to escape through a back entrance of a luxury hotel, but Michael and investigators cornered her. Her designer heels sank into the wet pavement as officers tightened the cuffs on her wrists. "You don't understand," she cried, mascara streaking down her face. "He made me do it." But the evidence told a different story. She was as guilty as Daniel, and the world knew it. The courtroom overflowed when their trial began. Elena sat in the front row, her hands resting protectively on her belly, her eyes steady as she faced the people who had tried to end her life. The jury listened to recordings of Daniel and Sienna's conversations, their cold planning of her death. They watched the video Michael had captured the night she was buried alive. Gasps echoed, tears fell, and rage simmered in every heart present. When the verdict was read, the room erupted. Guilty on all charges: fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Daniel's shoulders sagged, his eyes hollow. Sienna collapsed in tears, clawing at his arm as if he could save her, but he shook her off. In that moment, the alliance built on lust and greed shattered completely. The judge's words sealed their fate. Decades behind bars. No penthouses, no champagne, no empire. Only cold walls and steel bars. As officers led them away, Daniel glared at Elena one last time, his voice a hoarse growl. "You ruined me." Elena stood, her voice calm but firm. "No, Daniel, you ruined yourself." The crowd applauded as he was dragged out, the sound of justice ringing louder than his curses. Sienna's sobs echoed down the hallway, fading into silence. Outside the courthouse, supporters gathered, chanting Elena's name. Reporters thrust microphones toward her, asking how it felt to win. She didn't gloat. She simply placed a hand on her stomach and said, "This isn't just my victory. It's for every woman who has been silenced, betrayed, or left for dead. We are stronger than they think." For Daniel and Sienna, the punishment was complete. Their empire was gone, their reputations destroyed, their freedom stolen, and the world they tried to bury Elena in had become the prison that buried them instead. The storm had passed. The trial was over. Justice delivered. For the first time in months, Elena awoke without fear pressing down on her chest. The mansion no longer felt like a refuge, but a home. A place where she could breathe freely and dream again. In the weeks that followed, she poured herself into healing. William ensured the best doctors cared for her pregnancy, monitoring every heartbeat, every flutter. Michael remained a constant presence, protective yet unobtrusive, quietly watching over her with the loyalty of someone who had seen her at her lowest and vowed never to let her fall again. Elena often walked the gardens of William's estate, her hand resting on her growing belly, whispering to the life inside her. "We made it," she would murmur. "They tried to bury us, but we rose." The flowers around her bloomed brighter, as if nature itself celebrated her survival. When her child was born, a healthy baby boy with her eyes and her father's smile, Elena wept tears of joy. Holding him in her arms, she felt the weight of every betrayal lift, replaced by something stronger than revenge, love. She named him Gabriel, a symbol of hope, a reminder that light could emerge from the darkest of nights. Publicly, Elena became more than just a survivor. She stepped into her inheritance, guided by William, learning to run the empire her father had left behind. But she redefined it, not as a monument to power and greed, but as a force for good. She funded shelters for women, programs for children, and initiatives that gave voices to those who had been silenced. The world watched in awe as the woman who had been buried alive transformed into a beacon of strength. Reporters asked her what kept her going. She always answered the same: "Because I refused to let betrayal define me." My story isn't about what they did to me, it's about what I chose to do after. At night, when the world was quiet, Elena would sit by Gabriel's crib humming lullabies her mother once sang. The shadows no longer frightened her. Instead, they reminded her of the journey she had survived. Daniel and Sienna's names faded into obscurity, their legacy one of shame. Elena, however, became a name spoken with admiration. She was no longer the woman they tried to erase. She was the woman who rose from the grave and built a future brighter than ever. And as she stood on the balcony of her estate, Gabriel in her arms, the city lights twinkling in the distance, she whispered words that carried not just for herself, but for every woman who had ever been broken and rebuilt. "They tried to bury me, but they didn't know I was a seed. And now I will never stop growing." So that's how our story comes to an end. My wonderful friends, you're still here with me, aren't you? If you've stayed all the way to this moment, then something inside this story must have touched your heart in a very real way. And maybe, just maybe, it's because Elena's journey isn't only hers, it's also a reflection of our own struggles. Life will betray us, disappoint us, and sometimes even try to bury us. But as the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once said, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." What tried to destroy Elena became the very reason she rose stronger. And that can be true for you too. No matter how deep the pain, healing is possible. No matter how dark the night, there is always dawn waiting to break. We can't always control what happens to us, but we can always choose how to rise from it. If this story has touched you, please give it a like, share it with someone who might need it today, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories. Together, let's keep growing stronger, one story at a time.